You're not gonna believe what just happened. I was minding my own business, pulling my pickup truck into my own garage when suddenly I hear shouting outside. At first, I thought maybe someone was in trouble, so I stepped out to check. That's when I saw her, the infamous HOA Karen, standing at the end of my driveway, phone in hand, already talking to 911. And guess why? Because she didn't like the look of my truck. Now, to be clear, this isn't some abandoned junker. It's a clean, well-kept pickup, parked inside my garage, not even on the street. But according to Karen, it's a neighborhood eyesore and not in compliance with community standards. Keep in mind, there's no HOA rule against trucks in garages. Still, she was convinced she had the right to call the police on me over a parked vehicle in a private garage on private property. At first, I thought it was a prank, but when the cops actually showed up, things got a whole lot more real. I tried to explain, but Karen wouldn't back down. She was determined to prove I was breaking some kind of rule, even if she had to twist the truth to do it. What happened next took an unexpected turn, and it definitely didn't end the way she thought it would. So while I'm standing there trying to make sense of why the police were even here, Karen starts ranting about community image and how trucks attract the wrong type of people. I kid you not, she actually said that. One of the officers looked at me like even he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I calmly pointed out that the truck was fully parked inside my garage, completely off the street, and that I've lived here longer than Karen has even been on the HOA board. That's when she pulled out some folded paper from her purse. It was a printout of the HOA guidelines, except she'd highlighted random sections that had nothing to do with garage parking or pickup trucks. I knew because I'd read the same handbook when I moved in. Still, she kept pushing, claiming the truck disrupts the uniform look of the neighborhood. At this point, a few neighbors started peeking out their windows. Some even came outside, probably curious about the flashing lights or hoping for some neighborhood drama. I could see one guy filming from his porch. Great. Now I was going viral for parking in my own garage. But what really got me? One of the officers actually asked if I could move the truck just to keep the peace. And that's when things started to shift. I looked at the officer and asked calmly, "So, you want me to move my truck out in my garage because she doesn't like it?" He didn't say yes exactly, but kind of shrugged like he was caught in the middle. Meanwhile, Karen stood there with this smug look on her face, like she'd just won some kind of neighborhood battle. The weird thing was, it wasn't just about the truck anymore. It felt like she was trying to make a point, like she needed control, and I was the easiest target that day. What she didn't know was that this wasn't the first time she'd pulled something like this. Another neighbor, Mike, came over and quietly told me she complained about his work van too, saying it was too commercial for a residential area, even though he runs a alleged home repair business and parks it in his own driveway. It's starting to look like she's got a thing against anyone who doesn't fit her perfect neighborhood image. The craziest part, Karen doesn't even live directly across from me. Her house is way down the block, so she'd have to go out of her way just to see my garage. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about rules, it was personal. Then another neighbor, someone I barely knew, walked up and said, "You're not the first, and she's not done." As soon as that neighbor said, "She's not done," the whole situation felt heavier. More neighbors started gathering, some curious, some clearly fed up. Karen, still holding her folder of so-called evidence, looked like she was gearing up for a full-blown HOA power move. She was waving around pages, pointing at me, then at the officers, ranting about property value, community standards, and how my pickup truck was setting a bad example. It was like she thought she was on some mission to cleanse the neighborhood of anything she didn't personally approve of. The officers tried to calm things down, but the crowd only made Karen louder. Then, out of nowhere, she blurted, "If the HOA won't take action, I'll start a petition to have him removed." That's when people really started reacting. A few gasped. One neighbor actually laughed and said, "You can't evict someone for owning a truck, Karen." But she wasn't joking. She looked around like she was expecting backup, but no one stepped in. At that moment, her expression changed. She wasn't just annoyed, she was losing control, and she knew it. I stayed quiet, watching, waiting, trying not to let her drag me into some shouting match. But then one of the officers asked if we could all step aside for a more formal discussion. That's when I knew things were about to get serious, really serious. As we stepped aside with the officers, trying to get some space from the growing crowd, one of them pulled out a notepad and started asking more direct questions. "Do you have any documentation from the HOA about truck restrictions?" I nodded and told him I'd actually emailed the HOA board months ago, just to be safe before I even bought the truck. I pulled up the email on my phone, and that's when it happened. Asterisk the twist I didn't see coming asterisk. The officer looked at the screen, then raised his eyebrow. "Is this from Karen?" he asked. And sure enough, it was. Months ago, she'd replied from the HOA board's general email, saying there were no specific rules against parking a personal use pickup truck in a garage. Her name was right there at the bottom of the message. I looked over at her. She saw the email. Her face turned completely stiff. She didn't say a word. The officer glanced back at her and said, "Ma'am, did you respond to this?" That's when she changed her story, fast. She claimed the rules had been updated since then, and that she didn't recall sending that specific message. But she was clearly rattled. That's when another neighbor, one who had been quiet this whole time, stepped forward with something even crazier. A printed newsletter from last month, with a rule amendment that Karen had allegedly written herself one that was never voted on. The moment that neighbor handed the newsletter to the officer, the whole energy shifted. It had Karen's name on it, sure, but there were no signatures, no board approval, and no official vote recorded anywhere. It looked like she'd written the amendment herself, printed it, and slipped it into mailboxes like it was legit HOA policy. The officer examined it, then looked at Karen dead serious. "Ma'am, did the HOA board authorize this rule change?" She hesitated, stumbling over her words. "I mean, I drafted it, with the board's interest in mind." But no one was buying it anymore. One of the neighbors who is actually on the board, someone Karen clearly didn't expect to show up, spoke up and said, "This was never discussed. This isn't official. And honestly, this kind of behavior is way out of line." Karen's face went pale. The officers pulled her aside, and while they didn't arrest her or anything, they started taking a formal statement. She tried to spin it like she was just trying to maintain neighborhood values, but it was clear she'd overstepped big time. As things started to calm down, neighbors came up to me, shaking their heads, some even apologizing for not stepping in sooner. It felt like a weird kind of victory, but just as I was about to head back inside, one of the officers quietly said, "By the way, this isn't the first complaint we've had about her using HOA authority to intimidate people." As things started to calm down, neighbors came up to me, shaking their heads, some even apologizing for not stepping in sooner. It felt like a weird kind of victory. But just as I was about to head back inside, one of the officers quietly said, "By the way, this isn't the first complaint we've had about her using HOA authority to intimidate people." That's when I realized this wasn't over, not yet. After that night, everything changed. A few days later, I got an official letter from the HOA board, not a warning, but an apology. They confirmed that Karen had been acting without approval and that there were no valid restrictions against parking a pickup truck in a garage. The board assured me steps were being taken to prevent anything like that from happening again. Apparently, several neighbors came forward with similar stories, complaints, false notices, even threats about fines that weren't real. Turns out, Karen had been running her own version of the HOA behind the scenes for months. The board held an emergency meeting, and by the end of the week, she was removed from her position. Quietly, but definitely. I didn't celebrate, but there was definitely a sense of relief around the neighborhood. People actually started talking again, like really talking. One neighbor who Karen had called out for his work van, he's now helping folks fix up their porches. Another neighbor brought cookies over to say thanks for standing up. It felt like the community was healing a bit. The board held an emergency meeting, and by the end of the week, she was removed from her position. Quietly, but definitely. I didn't celebrate, but there was definitely a sense of relief around the neighborhood. People actually started talking again, like really talking. One neighbor who Karen had called out for his work van, he's now helping folks fix up their porches. Another neighbor brought cookies over to say thanks for standing up. It felt like the community was healing a bit. As for me, I still park my pickup truck in the same spot, right inside my garage. But now, when I close the door behind it, I know I didn't just defend a parking choice. I stood up against intimidation disguised as rules. This whole thing reminded me that sometimes the real issue isn't the truck in the garage, it's the people trying to control what they don't own. So yeah, the next time someone questions your right to live peacefully in your own home, stand your ground. Because when the truth rolls out, just like my truck, it's hard to stop. Thanks for watching, and if you've ever had a wild HOA story, drop it in the comments.